Good morning, everyone. This is Michelle Saunders from Therap Services. I hope you're having a great Monday morning. We still have a couple of people joining the webinar, but we're going to go ahead and kick things off this morning. If you don't know me, I am the business development consultant for Pennsylvania as well as a couple of other states. I am based currently in Chicago, and I've worked for the company since 2012. Also joining me today is Stephanie Masters-Norton, and she is a Senior Training and Implementation Specialist with Therap. She's also the Product Team Lead for the Scheduling and Evv module. So she'll be demonstrating a couple of things here today as well. And also joining us from Therap is Gretchen Falk-Landfear, and she's a Senior Training and Implementation Specialist, and she covers several of our Pennsylvania accounts. So she'll be fielding questions today. If you haven't used GoToWebinar previously, you do have the ability to ask questions. You should have a panel or a little box on the right-hand side. You can certainly minimize that by hitting the little orange arrow, and that will make the box just smaller so you have a full screen of what we're going to go through today. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. So hopefully you can see my screen. If you don't see my screen, feel free to mention that in the questions area or the chat. And as you have questions, because everyone is muted, go ahead and type those into the questions area. We'll be answering those as we have time to do so. And just real quick, Stephanie, for a sound check, can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you okay. Can you hear me okay?
I sure can. Excellent. Okay. Well, we're going to get started. I am logged into a demo account. It's a Pennsylvania demo account. So everything that you are going to see today is pretend information. So no PHI, no real individual information. And just a quick overview regarding Evv. We are currently working with many states on electronic visit verification. This is a new module in Therap. It's been around since May of 2018 and has had multiple, I want to say 7 or 8 iterations already. So some of you who are on the call who saw it back in May, it's different than when it was in May, and we'll continue to keep adding those new pieces and needed pieces as we move forward with future iterations of this module. Therap's Evv component is tied into our scheduling piece. I'll be demonstrating that in just a moment. And I guess just a little bit of information in terms of SAN data, because it looks like Pennsylvania has chosen SAN data as an open system, but as its Evv provider for the state. We're very familiar with SAN data. We are working in other states with SAN data. Ohio is probably the state that we're the furthest along in terms of Evv implementation and rollout, as is Ohio. They're actually entering or just started phase 2 of rollout, which will affect DD providers. So I think a lot of states will be watching Ohio and how things go, but just in terms of the use of SAN data and working with SAN data as a registered vendor for the data aggregator, we're certainly well versed in that. So where I'd like to start is on your agency tab. In terms of the setup of this module, there's a little bit of setup on the admin side. I don't want to take time today to really run through that, but essentially on the admin side for setup, you're noting the number of hours your employees can work. You're noting the service description codes that they can work in, whether they have the ability to self-schedule, and Stephanie will address that in a little more detail. And just a very quick overview of our plan for today. I plan to review the scheduling setup briefly, just so you see what that looks like. Then I'll pass things over to Stephanie. She will log into the mobile application and demonstrate how employees will check in and check out for their shifts, and also show some reports. She'll show self-check-in, IVR, and offline check-in. And I think I hit all of those points. So in terms of the setup of the scheduling module, on your agency tab, this is something that we would need to enable for you. If you are not a Therap customer, we have a whole lot of stuff that we do, including incident reports, goal tracking, progress notes, all kinds of stuff. We're just focusing on that scheduling Evv piece today. So I'm going to go over my role in this account is that of a master scheduler. So I have a high level of access to get in and create schedules for, individuals served for my employees. So the different programs and sites that I have in my organization will populate. These will be specific to your organization. And I'm just going to choose a couple of these. And I've already set up a sample schedule for today. I'm going to choose my individual served as well as my employees. So the screen that you see now is the setup of that actual schedule. So I'm showing today's view. I want to run through a couple of things regarding the schedule. You have multiple different ways you can see the schedule. I can see it in an agenda format. I can see it by your employees, which we call staff. So that's the staff view. It does automatically default to the individual served view, and I'll talk about the different statuses and colors that you see in just a minute. You can also see that by a program view and by week and month. The week and month views aren't my favorite at this point. We have some filtering mechanisms in place, but I do think in terms of the way Therap really developed and planned out this schedule was an individual-based schedule. So I'm going to stay on that tab for right now. In terms of your different colors or the different statuses, any slot or shift that you create that is still in draft format that hasn't been approved will be this gray color. I don't have one of those currently on the screen. Any shift or slot that has been approved will show up in a blue color. Open shifts will show up in that pink color, and your employees can actually communicate that they would like to work that shift. They can't just take that shift. That again goes back to that master scheduler privilege. You see your incomplete shifts. That means that the employee has checked in for the shift, but they have not checked out for the shift yet. So that means they're currently providing services. And then you see your completed shift. So that means the employee has checked in as well as checked out for that shift. And when I hover over those different slots or shifts, you see additional information listed there. You do have the capability to make templates, so you're not recreating the schedule each day. If you have individuals who have a set schedule, you're able to create a template based off of that set schedule and apply that out. You also have the ability to bulk copy and bulk approve. You see your template information listed here as well. I'm not going to get in the weeds into that today. Happy to meet with any of you individually to run through that full start to finish of how to set up the schedule. We want to kind of focus on the EVV part of it today. In terms of a new slot, let's say I just realized that Charles Allen needs additional services today for some reason. I can click on new slot and schedule that, or I can just do a drag and drop, which is what I am going to do. So when I drag and drop, your schedule slot shows up. You can see I'm adding an additional slot for 9:45 to 12:45 today. You see the individual served. You see the program. If there's multiple programs, that person might be in, multiple different, programs within your organization. Those would populate here. I just have one listed, the Colonial Park Group Home. When I select the service, again, you can have multiple services here. And this is really the piece that I say is Therap's secret sauce, because we have the service description code. You see that W8742 listed here. The other piece that you have is you see the number of units that have been assigned for the day as well as the week. That populates there. So again, in terms of utilization, you're seeing that information real time. So I'm going to choose that personal care services. And on my schedule, you see some other things. You see, CPS and some other things. I know some of those aren't necessarily EVV-able services. For those of you who aren't familiar with Therap, we do that whole billing portion. We bill directly to Pennsylvania Promise, which is why I listed that today. The next area when you're setting up a slot or a shift is your staff. And you see I have some generic names listed here. You would have your full names of your employees. This was just used for demonstration purposes a couple of weeks ago when we attended the PAR EVV vendor fair. So I'm going to go ahead and assign myself. Again, for the staff member, you see the number of hours that they have already been scheduled for the day, 6 hours and 15 minutes, as well as for the week. And you see that limit of 40 hours. That's one of the admin scheduling pieces that I referenced a few moments ago. You do have the ability to exceed the number of hours per day or per week, but it will let you know that information. So I'm going to schedule myself for that area. The next area you see is whether or not this is billable, because Therap recently, in one of our scheduling EVV releases, we released the ability to bill off of that EVV data, which is pretty exciting stuff. Your next couple of areas, your start address and end address, you're going to note where this is. I'm going to keep it simple and just do the site address for each of these. So we have our site address as 123 Main Street. And that information you will have your GPS coordinates set up from your program set up on the admin side. And I'm going to have that end address just be the same. At the very bottom, you have the ability to note any information. So perhaps that it's, you know, time to pick up that individual's medications at the pharmacy, or maybe, you know, part of what you're to be doing today is going grocery shopping. You can put any notes there. You have 200 characters for your notes. I'm just going to leave that area blank. Next, I have the ability to approve or to save. Save would put it into that draft status. It's not approved yet. The employee cannot see that information. When I click approve, that's going to go into approved status, and you see that that turns that blue color. In terms of other pieces, I think I'll go ahead and stop there. Stephanie or Gretchen, do we have any questions that need to be addressed or that you'd like to read to the entire audience?
Not seeing any questions so far.
Okay, excellent. I am going to change presenter, and Stephanie, I'm going to send presenter over your way.
All right. I'm going to actually show, do you want me to go straight into mobile app?
Yeah, I think that would be great. Oh, I can make, do I need to make someone different presenter?
Stephanie Masters, but I think I have access to do it. So let me go ahead and log in. So like Michelle was saying, you do have some setup pieces involved in this module. And if you choose to move forward with purchasing this, you'd be working directly with myself and a couple of other team members to get you set up and make sure that you are implemented at your agency. And part of the setup process is discussing whether self-check-in would be a good option for your agency. So there's an option to allow staff to be a little more flexible with their scheduling. So instead of them having, sorry guys.
That was just Stephanie joining the webinar via her mobile device. Yeah, that's okay. Sorry about the noise there. We realized a couple of minutes, before the GoToWebinar meeting that I wasn't able to show that piece, so Stephanie graciously offered to do so. And I can see your mobile screen, Stephanie. It looks great. Perfect.
So you would log in if you're not using the mobile app currently. You would log in with your same login information like you do on the browser. I'm just going to go to the scheduling EVV line, and this is an end user view. What Michelle was showing you on her screen was from the schedule admin perspective, where you're actually creating, updating, approving shifts or slots. From this perspective, you would only be checking in and out. So the staff that is approved to work that shift would come here to find it and check in. So I'm going to click on the scheduling EVV, and it defaults to the current date, and it's showing me just the things that I'm approved to work for this date. I do have the ability to go back and look at previous dates or go into the future, but I can only do it a day at a time. So I'm going to come back to today, and you'll see that the line is blue beside each of those, and that's just letting me know that I'm approved to work these, but I haven't taken any action on them yet. So if I wanted to see a little bit more information before I check in, I could touch on any of these shifts and it would load a little bit more information. an image. If you have a photo of the individual on their data form, you would be able to view that there, along with the address where this is supposed to begin. And if you look down towards the bottom, you'll see where it says View Note. So that is where I could read the note that the scheduler has left on this shift. So I'm supposed to do a blood glucose check and an insulin injection while I'm on this nursing services shift. So I could check in and out from here. It's really meant for a quick swipe. So if I'm walking in the door reporting for work, I could just swipe here to check in. This shift was supposed to begin at 9:15. It's only 9:16. So when I load this, it's going to pull my location. And this is using cell towers and internet access to find the device location. So users do have to have location services enabled on their phone or tablet in order to do this piece. And the mobile app is the only way you're going to get the geolocation. So if you're using a browser on your phone, it's not going to give you the location there. So up here at the top, I have the address that it thinks I'm at. And if I click on that, it'll show me other nearby addresses. So occasionally it may not put you at the exact spot that you are. So if you needed to move that house address over a little bit, you have some nearby options. But there's no ability to say I'm in a completely different part of town. It's just showing me other mapped addresses on this in this area. So I can check in here, and because I'm on time, technically, I was supposed to start at 9:15, it's only 9:17 where I am. So it is allowing me to check in without any comment needed. And when I go back to this slot, you'll see that's turned from blue to yellow or orange, just letting me know that I've started that, I've checked in, but I have not checked out. So if I try to go back and check out on that same slot, I was supposed to work, I think, until 11 o'clock. So if I try to check out, I'm going to get this error message. So staff can check in early or check out early or late, but if they're more than 15 minutes outside of what was scheduled, it's going to force them to leave a comment. So if you had a staff scheduled to come in at 9:15, they actually got here at 8:45, it would allow them to check in early, but they have to leave a reason or a comment to explain why. So maybe I left sick. And then after I leave that comment, it will accept my checkout. So now that's turned green. And I could return to that to see what my check-in and checkout time were, my location, any comments. But as a staff person, I don't have the ability to change any of that. So if this time needed to be modified, the schedule admin would have that ability to go back in and update this time. Or if a staff forgets to clock out, the schedule admin could go back in and add that in. So you also have this self check-in option down at the bottom, and there is some setup that goes into this self check-in. It's tied to your services. So those service authorizations and those billing codes and descriptions, you would define which of those services that you created would be allowed to self check-in. So I'm going to click on that self check-in button down at the bottom, and it's putting the current time. This is meant to be used as if I'm reporting to work right now. I would just self check-in, and this is good for something like respite or maybe companion care where the staff is working directly with the family on a schedule and not going through an agency scheduler. So you could give them a little bit more flexibility to create their own shifts just by clocking in. So I am going to have to complete all of these fields though. So I need to say how long I'm planning to work. So maybe I'm going to work till 1. And which individual am I working with? Which program is that falling under? So if I choose a program where this has not been configured, like residential, if I go to click on service, it's not going to find anything. So self check-in will appear there for all staff, but only the ones who have been configured to provide a specific service or the service has been deemed self check-in will be able to proceed. So if you haven't configured anything, they won't be able to get past this point of selecting a service. So I'm going to go back here and choose a service or program that I have configured this. So I'm going to go to nursing because I've said nursing services can self-check-in. And now you'll see that nursing services option is there. It does still show those unit limits for the day and the week. So they can see how many they've already been scheduled for the day or the week out of that total. But those totals where it says for the week, I have a total of 21 units. That is not actually a hard stop. So if I needed to schedule someone beyond that limit, there's nothing in place that will stop me from doing that. So this is really just a comparison to keep in mind as you're scheduling. So I'll select that service. It's already got my name as the staff person since I'm the one checking in. And when I go to next, it looks exactly the same. Since I'm checking in right now, I don't have to leave a comment. If I had changed my time on that self-check-in and said that I was checking in at 8 o'clock, it would force me to leave a comment since it's actually 9:20 right now. So there is that logic built in. There is another rule built in around the checking in and checking out time, and it has to do with if you've exceeded the 12-hour mark. So if I'm trying to check in for something in the future that is more than 12 hours in the future, it will not allow me to do that. Same thing if I'm trying to check out for something, maybe I forgot to check out yesterday and I'm coming now to check in for this service, it will not allow me if I'm more than 12 hours out. So I'll show you what that looks like. So here's something for 4 o'clock tomorrow. And I don't know if you can see down there at the bottom, but it's giving me this error message that I'm outside of my 12 hours window, so check-in is not allowed. So those are the only restrictions that are in place right now on the check-in and check-out time. So you have a 12-hour limit. You can't check in or out more than 12 hours outside of that scheduled time. And then if you're checking in or out, if you're more than 15 minutes out of that scheduled time, it's going to require a comment. So that is going to give you a little bit more information of why staff are checking in earlier or later than what was scheduled. All right, so this is the extent of what the mobile app can do. You can check in for a pre-approved slot, or I could do self-check-in if my agency has configured that. All right, so one of the questions that was just asked, what if someone does not have access to the internet? Would it capture the check-in, check-out, and upload it later? That is a fabulous question and a great segue into what I wanted to show you next. So I'm going to kind of flip back and forth between my mobile screen and my computer screen to show you this. But the offline app is a new feature that we've just released. Like Michelle was saying, we're doing a lot of development in this module. It just came out last May, and we've had 4 different releases on it. And as we're working with users, we're getting feedback to find out, what are we missing? What needs to be considered? The big focus right now is EVV and meeting those standards, since that's a deadline that we have to meet by 2020 of next year. Some states are actually rolling out EVV this year in July or October. So we're sort of under a little bit of pressure for EVV, which is why it's getting a lot of the focus right now for development. So we released this offline EVV app where if you don't have access to the internet, you can use this offline application and then sync up to it later. So I'll show you what that looks like. It's included with your purchase of the module, so it's not an add-on. It would be part of your scheduling EVV purchase. So each user would have to configure their own offline EVV pin, and I can do that from the app here. You'll see that offline EVV configuration. And we would put in a 6-digit offline pin. And I don't remember what mine was, so I'm going to make it super secure, which is something easy for me to remember. In real life, you would want to make this a very secure pin. This is essentially going to be your password for the offline app. And then I'm going to log out of this app. And if you see down at the bottom below that login button, you'll see where it says switch to offline login. So I'm going to switch. My phone's not cooperating. Okay, there we go. Offline EVV login. And the only thing that's different here is instead of a password, it's asking for that offline PIN. So I'm going to put in my regular login name, my regular provider code, and now I'm on the offline app. So it is asking me to add a new slot, and this is where I'm going to switch back and forth between my computers. I am going to share my screen and show you how staff could find the offline slots.
And Stephanie, while you're switching back and forth, there was another question just regarding access to the system and can everyone see all individuals' information or not? No, in terms of Therap, the information that you are able to see is based off of your level of access in the system and the individuals or the caseload that you need to see. So as you're logging in as a staff member, you're only going to see the shifts that you need to see and that you are working. And one additional point before I pass it back to Stephanie, the other piece, and I think the beautiful piece of this is, if you want to just manage your scheduling via this area, but it's not an Evv viable service, your employees can still check in or check out either from the mobile app with GPS location, or they can do that from their desktop of Therap. So you wouldn't have the geolocation listed there, but that it still, provides that fully functioning schedule, and you can see your schedule as an employee, check in, check out. If it's an Evv viable service, obviously doing that from the mobile app. Okay, Stephanie, back to you.
Awesome, thank you. So like Michelle was mentioning, you can view your schedule as a staff person on the dashboard. So you don't have to use that mobile app, especially if you're not trying to meet Evv requirements. So staff could come here on their dashboard on the browser to view and check in if you've allowed check-in from the web. So this is similar to that mobile view that we were just looking at. It's only going to show me what I'm scheduled for. On the dashboard, though, I actually have a nice week and month perspective that I could look at, so I can see a little bit more of what's coming or what was in the past. I can see things that I forgot to check out for, or maybe things that I haven't worked yet. And if you notice, some of these, it might be easier to see on the week, some of these have a red border around them. Anytime you see the red border around the slot, that's letting me know that there's a variance, more than 15-minute difference between what was scheduled to be worked and what I actually worked. So you have a little bit of a visual, and the staff can sort of see maybe where they were off their time or what forgot to check in, forgot to check out. So if I am preparing to go out in the field, I know I'm not going to have an internet connection, I can use this offline schedule here. And if I know I'm going to be gone for a specific amount of time, maybe a week before I'm back in the office on internet, I could put in that whole time period. I'm just going to pull today's schedule right now, and it's going to download that as a PDF. So this also works with our IVR, which I'm going to talk about next. But this is HIPAA compliant in that there is no PHI included on this. So if I'm using the offline app or if I'm using IVR, I would be using this offline schedule to find the slot IDs. So it's telling me what time I'm scheduled to work. It's not showing me the individual or the location. It's just showing me the time, and then I have this slot ID. So I'm going to switch back to my mobile app and show you what that looks like.
And Stephanie, I'll actually pop in again just with some additional commentary. That piece with not having any PHI, any protected health information, that is huge. That's really important. One of the things that Therap really takes pride in is, the integrity of your data, the security of your data, and in terms of being able to, sync that up later on without having any PHI sitting on your device that someone could take. That's really, really important.
Awesome. So I'm back sharing my mobile screen. And what you would really want to do, probably, if you had the luxury of knowing in advance, is go ahead and load these in while you have an internet connection. So you can actually see where you're supposed to be at these times and who you're working with. Because once you put them on the offline app, it's just going to show you the times. So at some point you would want to look at your real schedule and make sure you know where you're supposed to be and who you're working with during that time. But what I'm going to do is load these offline slots here, and then I can save them without checking in yet. So I can just sort of load them up, and then when I'm ready to check in, I could come back and do that. So I have this add new slot button down at the bottom, and it's asking me for my offline slot ID. So if you remember a few seconds ago, I had that offline schedule up, and it has specific slot IDs. So I'm going to go ahead and load in a shift that I have coming up at 11 o'clock. So I'm just looking at my offline schedule and getting those IDs, and then I can say okay. So it's loading it, and you'll see it says pending check-in, pending check-out. So the intention is you could go ahead and load up all of these for the day or the week, however long you're going out in the field. And then that way I would just come in, check out when I'm ready. So I've got those loaded, and I could go ahead and check in or check out on this slot if this is what I'm doing now. So I'm sure I want to check in. So it's giving me my date, time, and then if you notice under that, you'll also have coordinates. So this is also giving you the location from the device, even though we're not online right now, we're on the offline app. And then same thing when I'm ready to check out, it's going to give me that date, time, and location. So once you're done checking in on those slots, I would just log back in to my regular app. So if I'm back on the internet, and once I leave that offline app, it automatically defaults back to the live app. So if I needed to still be offline, I would just need to click down there to switch that.
And Stephanie, there was a question, who loads those offline slots, the employee or the manager? Do you want to address that question?
Yeah, absolutely. So that would be on the employee that would do that. So they're in charge of loading their own slots to get ready for their day. So they can generate that offline schedule and get that information. I'm actually going to meet with our team to find out if there's the ability for an admin to generate that information, or to at least generate the offline schedule to send it to someone if they're in a situation where they are unable to access it.
And I think at that point, really, Stephanie, that would be going back to that master scheduler, and they would be, you know, assisting that employee to do what they needed to do. And again, that's only in the instance of, I don't have internet, I'm not able to, you know, log in, and I need to do that offline check-in. Is that right?
Right. So once I've logged back into my live app, I'm back connected to the internet, this is the message I'm going to see. It's telling me that I have offline EVV slots that I have not uploaded yet, so I need to upload those first. So I'm going to click upload, and it will tell me that it's successfully uploaded, but it could take up to 30 minutes to process that data. So at that point, it's going to show up for the schedule admin on their end, so they could see what I've actually done for check-in and check-out. And it doesn't look like it's caught up here yet. So it's in the process of uploading that data to sync it back into the system. So the offline app is a great solution for when you are working in the field in a place where you don't have connectivity, particularly if you know in advance and you can plan and go ahead and load in those slots. Even if you didn't have it loaded in advance, if you have your offline schedule or access to your offline schedule, you could do it there at that time as well. So someone said if you didn't know you were going to need the offline app and you hadn't preloaded, you couldn't check in offline. So if you were in the field and you realize you're in a place where you don't have internet connection and you didn't have your offline schedule printed, you didn't have those slots, you would have to get that slot ID information. We are talking about a self check-in offline, but that hasn't come to fruition yet. We just started that conversation over the national conference. So it's something that we're, especially with this offline, it's very new, and just getting usage to find out from users what other situations might come up to think through those. So those are good points that you're bringing up, Brenda.
Yeah, and keep in mind that at the end of the day, if there was a shift that was worked and the employee didn't have, you know, the ability to pull those offline codes, or that maybe they didn't have access to that area quite yet, that master scheduler would be able to go back in and make those exceptions for that slot.
Definitely. And I'll show you what that looks like. All right, so I'm going to close this and go back. So if I am the scheduler and I need to make some changes to what's going on or look at someone's time, I could do a search to pull up anything and edit from there, or I could go back to my scheduling grid. It's just a matter of preference. I'm going to take you back to the grid just to show you these colors and what all this looks like. So if I'm looking back at this slot that's green or orange and I want to go in and make a change, in this case, I don't have an out time. Maybe this person forgot to check out, or I need to add in that time manually. I have this edit button here, which will allow me to go in and modify their time in, time out. So whether that is adding in a manual time that they missed, that they didn't check in, check out for, or updating their time. Maybe they forgot to check out and checked out several hours late, but I need to go in and update it. So whatever the check-in, check-out time is going to feed into your reports and show your total hours worked versus total hours scheduled. So you would want to make sure that your check-in and check-out time is correct. Yeah, so if someone forgets to check out or check in completely on this slot, the admin, scheduler admin, could come in and put in a time here. And the nice thing about that is, you know, in Therap we have the update history, so any changes that are made are going to be logged here in the update history. And once someone has checked in, checked out on a slot, you won't have the option to edit the content of the slot, this information up here at the top. Since they've acted on that, the only option you have is to edit their actual time in, time out. All right, so I'd mentioned earlier the IVR, and it is going to work the same way as the offline schedule, or you're going to use the same document as the offline schedule. So if I go back to the schedule, IVR is actually an add-on purchase, and this is again specific for those EVV requirements. It is sort of the option of last resort for checking in and checking out. If you don't have internet access, for some reason the offline app is not an option to you, you could, if your agency had purchased IVR, which stands for Interactive Voice Response, you could call in and check in and out over the phone. So I'm going to attempt to do that for you now. How many devices can I use at one time? We will see.
It's a big question. We'll see if they play together nicely.
Yeah, I mean, it really is, in terms of technology, it is very low tech. It is just calling into an automated number and putting in a code to say, I'm here, I'm working now. So
really it's like that old school telephony, correct?
Yes, exactly.
And honestly, this is Michelle speaking again. I feel like this is very, you know, this is your last resort, but it is something that we have been asked to put in just to have as a backup possibility. I really feel that offline schedule makes more sense, but again, there's multiple options available.
So just like we had to make a pin for the offline app, you would need a pin for your IVR as well. So the system automatically generates an IVR user ID, and that will be available on the schedule. When we look at that offline schedule, it'll be listed there. So the staff don't necessarily have to remember this, but they do need to remember that pin has to be at least 6 digits. So that's like their password to verify that they are, oh good, I made it the same. That means I know what my PIN is now. So when I look at that offline schedule, the phone number is right here, and then the user ID is right there. So if I have that schedule with me, that's all I'm gonna need. And again, it's got no PHI, so I'm gonna try to put it on speakerphone so you can hear.
Welcome to Therap scheduling Evv system. Please enter your IVR user ID followed by a pound sign.
Right, so I'm gonna enter my ID.
Please enter your PIN code followed by a pound sign. Please enter a slot ID followed by a pound sign. To confirm checkout, press 1. To exit without checkout, press 2. Checkout has been successful. To select another slot, press 1. To exit, press 2. Thank you for using Therap scheduling Evv system.
All right, so again, pretty low tech. It's going to accept my in punch, my out punch. In that case, I'd already checked in for that slot, so the only option it gave me was to check out. And after I've checked out, if there's another slot that I'm ready to check in for, I could go ahead and do that while I'm on that same call. You could call in from any number. It doesn't have to be a landline. It could be a mobile device as well. The one thing to note about IVR is it's not giving you a location. Since it is sort of the low-tech last resort, it's not actually giving you any location data. It's just giving you a time in, time out. So if you're trying to get location, ultimately you would want staff to be using the mobile app, whether that is on the live production application, then when you're connected to the internet, or they could use that offline option to sync and then upload when they're back on an internet connection. So either way, the mobile app is going to give you that location data. If I go back to look at my schedule here, I can see this is where I checked in on the mobile app, and it's showing me that location. Here's where I checked out, and it shows me the phone number that I called from. So that's the only information that you're going to receive from the IVR is the date and time that they took that action and then what phone number they were calling from. And on the creation of the schedule from the schedule admin point of view, when you're creating that schedule, you do have the ability to list the specific phone number. So that gives some accountability that you're expecting them to call in from this number. So down here, I could put in that specific phone number there, and that does give a little bit of accountability. So if you're expecting them to call in from the individual's home, from their phone, then that would give you something to check against. If it's open and they can call from any phone, obviously you don't know exactly where they're going to be calling from.
And this is Michelle, just from a perspective of the IVR piece, I have not sold this piece to anyone. A majority of the organizations that we are working with have found that within the scheduling Evv piece, the self-schedule, the offline scheduling piece, all of that seems to be pretty functional. So again, that's really a last resort for you, but it is available.
Absolutely. All right, so I'm going to go and show you some reports now. And there are currently 2 reports available for this module. I'm going to go to the Agency Reports tab, and I'm looking for the report library. I'm just going to come in and type the first few letters of the word schedule to narrow down those searches. And it's my understanding that these reports are now in everyone's library. So if you just wanted to run this report just to see what the criteria are going to show, you're not going to have any data there if you're not using the module, but it should be in your report library. So I'm going to first look at this slot report. This is our most comprehensive report. It's got every piece of information about each slot. So I'm just going to run, I think our limitation here is a month. You can run a month at a time. And remember, since it's a report library report, it's actually agency-wide. So it's not going to be limited by any program or staff. This is definitely a report that I would recommend pulling up in Excel so that you can use your filters to narrow things down. And it's only going to be showing us this first 50 rows here, so we're not seeing all of our data. But if you look here at the top, you'll see all of the information that's available. And if I keep scrolling over, it just gets more and more. So I can identify the specific service, who was working that slot, the staff assigned. Was this self-checked in? So did the staff create this slot on their own? If it says no, that means the scheduler created this in advance. Here's where on the address on the slot where we said this should begin. And if we've put a slot end, so if there is a separate end address than the beginning address, I could list that as well. It's also going to show me if staff have checked in, what location did they check in from and how. So they used the mobile app. Here's their checkout, also on mobile. And then here's my time. So this is what was scheduled to work, 8 to 4. Here's what they actually worked. They clocked in 11:53, clocked out 11:54. And then this column is updated check-in time and updated check-out time. So if the schedule admin actually changed their time, I would see that here. So their original check-in was for 11:53, but the admin updated it to 10:53. And over here to the right, I can see how many hours they were scheduled to work. So what was the total duration based on when you said they should start and end? And then what is the total duration based on their actual check-in and check-out time? So if someone forgets to check out for you, this won't be totaled because there's no end time to do the total calculation. So in this case, you can see I was scheduled to work 8 hours and I only worked 1 hour and 1 minute. Recently, we had comments added to this report, which is really nice. So if you're seeing that someone has a wrong checkout or a late check-in, you would be able to read the comment of what they said for that check-in or checkout comment. And then also just the general comment, which is available on the slot at any time. So if they left you any information, here's one where they ran into bad traffic, which is why they were late. And I failed to show this on the mobile app, but you can also collect a signature or a voice recording on the mobile app. So as another level of accountability, you could actually allow or request staff to get you a signature. So I'm going to switch back and show you that really quickly.
And Stephanie, while you're doing that, there was one additional question I don't believe was answered. If the check-in was created after the fact, the GPS information would not show. Is that correct? And maybe you already addressed that and I missed it.
So if the check-in was created after the fact by the schedule admin, if they were manually putting it in, then no, there would not be geolocation. If staff forgot to check out and then went back to check out later, you know, 1 hour, 2 hours later, if they're doing it from the mobile app, it's still going to pull their location. But if they're not still at that service spot, then it's just going to show wherever they are then. So the geolocation comes from the act of checking in and checking out on the mobile app. So if it's outside of that, it won't be connected.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. So I'm going to go back. Sorry, I'm jumping around so much, but I'm going to go back to one of these slots that I created, so that I've already checked in and checked out for. So that means I've finished that service. I'm now ready to collect a signature. So if I'm looking down here on this slot, I'll see that verify option. And it's going to ask me how I would like to verify, via signature or voice. So signature is going to turn my screen into a signing spot. If I'm working with someone who's unable to sign, you could record up to 10 seconds of audio as a verification. So I'm just going to go to signature. And then I can sign on my device. Oh dear. Just close the whole app. There we go. And submitting that as soon as this, well, I'm doing it too late. It's telling me I can't do it more than 15 minutes outside of checkout. Once I add that signature, it's no longer going to be available for me to see, so staff won't be able to copy a signature or record that recording and play it back in the future. It's only going to be available to the schedule admin. So it's an option. It's not something you have to do. We have that ability now to collect that signature. And then it would be available for the schedule admin to view. All right. Hopefully this will be my final trick of switching back. All right, so that was the slot report, and I was showing you this verification line is just going to indicate if there is a verification, what type of verification. So I've got a signature or a voice recording to verify that. So I'm going to go back to my other report, which is the weekly staff report. This is really a report to show you hours worked versus hours scheduled. So you would want to make sure you've done some quality checks, that there are no missing in or out punches, because if you're relying on this report without checking that, it's not going to be correct. Because if you're missing any time, which inevitably you're going to be, then this total is not going to be the right amount of time. So this is showing me a week at a time who was scheduled. So that's why there are multiple lines with the same staff, because it's showing me for the week of the 1st, Rich was scheduled to work 22 hours, but he has no check-in, check-out time. That means maybe he never checked out, or he didn't check in or out on anything. So that's why that's blank. If I keep going down here, you'll see I'm listed several times. Here, I was scheduled for the week of the 1st, I was scheduled to work 35.5 hours. And based on my check-in and check-out time, I worked 1 hour and 1 minute. So you would want to do those checks to compare and make sure you're not missing any times. And that's something that you could do in that slot report, which is why I was recommending to pull it out to Excel and use those filters. You can filter for any blanks for check-in or check-out and just work on those first to make sure that you've got that time completed before you run this report on hours. And then one last thing I want to show you, and we'll open it up for questions. You can also, on your agency tab at the scheduling module, you can do a search. And if you're looking for just open slots or specific data, you can pull that up. So if you're trying to get a schedule for a particular program or particular individual or staff, you could narrow that down. And this is our first attempt at a printable schedule. So once you've got those search results that you're looking for, I can come down here and go to export to PDF. And now I have some semblance of a printable schedule to share. So it's showing me the scheduled start and end time, which individual they're working with, at what program, and which staff. So if you had curated your search specifically to one home or one staff, one individual, you could have a nice printable schedule to share or send via SCOM to the team so that they know what else is going on with that individual schedule.
And if you're not a Therap customer, SCOM is our HIPAA compliant communication system. It's very similar to email.
Yes. So there's a lot more going on in this module. If you proceed with moving forward, I'll be sure to walk you through all of the steps of setup and show you all of the different functionality within that module to make sure you're implementing it the best way at your agency. Michelle, is there anything else you wanted me to cover?
I don't think so. Certainly appreciate the nice comments back from those of you who are using this module in terms of enhancements that have been made. Again, in terms of, what Therap does typically is we try to get something out that isn't a final version so customers can give feedback. We appreciate you guys, working through that with us, giving that feedback, and as we continue to program those pieces in, I think this is really looking like a really good module. I'm certainly very excited about it, and I learned a lot from Stephanie today in terms of the IVR stuff and the offline check-in that I haven't had the time to delve into, so certainly appreciate that. Any other questions from anyone? We are winding down the hour. I'm not seeing anything else coming in. This webinar was being recorded. it will be posted to the Pennsylvania Therap webpage. So if for some reason a colleague or team member wanted to look at this and they weren't able to join the meeting today, that will be housed there. Also, feel free to just reach out to me if you want the link. I'll go ahead and get this converted and get it over to our team to upload to the Pennsylvania page. Not seeing anything else coming in, so we certainly appreciate your time. Thank you so much for spending an hour with us this morning. If you have additional questions about this module or anything else, I think everyone has my email address, but it's michelle.saunders@therapservices.net. Please reach out with any other questions, and we hope you all have a great rest of your Monday. Thanks, everyone. Take care.